A world of knights and monsters, a Primarch raised in shadows, and the first whispers of a betrayal that will shatter a legion forever. This is the origin of the Dark Angels. What's up, nerds? It's Zach the Goblin here. Warhammer 40k is incredibly interesting, but it has so much lore you might be stuck on where to start. A lot of people will want to start with the Horus Heresy, but with over 60 books, it might feel like a daunting task. Well, that's where this series comes in, where I explain the plot of each Horus Heresy book. This is for people who want to get into the series but don't have the time to invest to reading all the books, people that are jumping around the series but maybe want some added context, or even people who just want a quick refresher. If you like this video, please don't forget to like and subscribe to see more books explained. Just like last time, once this video hits 50 likes, I'll start on the next one. Subscribe and hit that noti bell for more Warhammer 40k content. This is the Horus Heresy Explained Quickly, Book 6, Descent of Angels by Mitchell Scanlon. Okay, first let's start with a little background. This book takes place well before the Horus Heresy on a death world named Caliban. A death world is a planet that's supposed to be too dangerous to support widespread human settlement. This could be for various reasons, but in this case, it was due to the great beasts of Caliban. These beasts populate the wilds. They are highly aggressive and have terrorized the population for centuries. To combat these beasts, bands of techno-medieval warrior knights were formed. These knights would then declare quests to slay beasts that were terrorizing communities. On one of these quests, warriors of the knightly order called, the Order, stumbled across the young Primarch, Lionel Johnson, whose capsule had landed in the forest of Caliban when chaos scattered all the Primarchs. The Lion was larger than a normal man, and due to growing up in isolation for around a decade, he was essentially feral. Initially, they were just going to kill him, but one of them, a man named Luther, sensed something different about him and convinced them instead to bring Johnson back to their fortress monastery. It was here that Luther gave him the name Lionel Johnson, which means the lion, the son of the forest. Because, well, they found him in a forest, and because his fierceness reminded Luther of one of the most feared great beasts, the Calibanite lion. Under Luther's care, Lionel Johnson learned to speak extremely quickly, becoming a skilled knight and a brilliant strategist who was unstoppable once he decided on a course of action. The Lion and Luther, who was also a great knight, formed a strong friendship and complemented each other's abilities and skills. They undertook many quests together and rose through the ranks of the Order, eventually announcing a crusade to rid Caliban of the great beasts once and for all. It's about here where the book begins. This book starts with a young boy named Zahadiel being dragged out of his bed with his arms tied and a hood thrown over his head. He is then taken to a secret room by a man known as Lord Cypher. Still bound and blinded, he is asked by a man who he is, with Zahadiel answering with his name and that he comes from a noble line, with another voice cutting in saying, "Oh, you think you deserve a place among us just because your daddy was important? You know, I don't think he's worthy. I think we should just throw him from the tower and be done with it." With the first voice saying, "Well, we'll see. First, we have to test him," placing a knife against Zahadiel's throat. Zahadiel is then told that a lie is a betrayal of their vows, and that if he lies, they will know it, and if they hear a lie, they will cut his throat. They then ask if he accepts these terms, with Zahadiel agreeing, with the voice saying, "Okay, well, understand, I am asking for an oath. Even when I take the knife away from your throat, even when I am dead, even when this knife is rusted and dull and useless, the oath you make by its edge will still be binding. Are you prepared to make an oath?" Zahadiel then making the oath. Zahadiel is then interrogated by Lord Cypher and the two unknown voices. They hurled rapid-fire questions at him one after another, from reciting entire passages of the verbatim from memory and then explaining each passage's meaning, to questions about sword work, like whether it was better to respond to a two-handed descending strike by evading the blow or by meeting it with a parry. And then once he answered, they would immediately grill him with a follow-up. Well, what kind of parry? Your opponent is right-handed and his blow comes at you on a high diagonal line. Do you deflect it to your left or your right? Do you follow with a riposte, a counter slash, or a punch with your free hand? Should that hand even be free? Where is your pistol? Answer quickly. And it went on and on like that, covering many different topics. Sometimes two of them would ask different questions at the same time, trying to confuse him. Through it all, Zahadiel refused to be flustered or intimidated. It didn't matter that he couldn't see or that his hands were tied. It didn't matter that there was a knife against his throat. He would not fail this test. He had come too far. He would not fall at this latest hurdle. "This is a waste of time," the third voice said. The same voice that said that they should just throw him from the tower. Proceeding to say that this whelp will never be a knight. It doesn't matter what his masters say. He just doesn't have what it takes. I say let's cut his throat and be done with it. We can always find another candidate for the path to knighthood. One that's perhaps more worthy of the honor. The questions coming from this third man were always the hardest. A lot of the times he wouldn't even ask questions. He would just verbally abuse Zahadiel. Where the first two didn't react when Zahadiel answered a question correctly, the third man always responded with bile and sarcasm. He was really just all around giving him a hard time. All of this culminating in him saying that Zahadiel will be an embarrassment to them. He's useless. We must be harsh in these things. One weak stone in a wall is enough to bring the whole structure crashing down. It is better to kill him here and now than take the risk that he may one day destroy us. He should have been drowned at birth like a tainted child. The first voice saying, "Oh, that's a little too far. You play your part, brother, but this is too far. The young man before us has done nothing to earn such disdain. You treat him too harshly. He has proved that he is worthy to train among us." "He is worthy," Lord Cypher agreed. "I vote in his favor." "As do I," said the first voice. "What about you, brother? Has he convinced you? Will you make it unanimous?" "I will," said the third voice. "I have played my part, but I had no doubt about him from the outset. He is worthy. I vote in his favor." So they take off Zahadiel's hood and he sees Lord Cypher, who he already knew was there. But he was awestruck to see that the other two voices belonged to none other than Lionel Johnson and Luther. In his first years with the Order, it was the closest Zahadiel had ever come to Johnson, and he felt his senses and reason desert him at the incredible presence of the warrior. He towered over Zahadiel, and the young man found himself staring intently at the magnificent leonine specimen of physical perfection and unabashed awe. Then, as Luther spoke, Zahadiel was struck by the resonance of his voice, knowing that its power would make men follow him into the depths of hell if he ordered them to march beside him. While it was true that Luther could in no way match Johnson's extraordinary physical stature and musculature, he was every bit as exemplary and heroic a figure. In their own ways, they were both giants. With a diagonal slash across Zahadiel's left palm, he swore a blood oath to protect the people of Caliban, and with that, Zahadiel became a member of the Order. The wound in his palm would heal without a scar, but strangely to Zahadiel, it was as if the wound was always there. It didn't pain or disable him, but he would feel its presence for the rest of his life. Zahadiel's cousin, Nemiel, had also been accepted into the Order, and they were closer than brothers. They shared a friendly rivalry that spurred them on to greater heights, each always trying to outdo the other in every possible way. They each wanted to be the fastest runner, the strongest swimmer, the most accurate shot, and so on. The nature of the test didn't matter as long as one of them could beat the other. Separately, they might have been counted as average candidates for knighthood. Together, though, driven on by their mutual rivalry, they had become more impressive prospects. Zahadiel and Nemiel were both expected to do well and rise far in the Order. As the elder of the two, even if it was only by a matter of weeks, their competition was perhaps harder on Nemiel than it was on Zahadiel. Sometimes the rivalry felt like a race he could not win. Every time Nemiel thought he had finally beaten his rival, Zahadiel would quickly prove him wrong by equaling and even exceeding his achievements. Zahadiel recognized the important role Nemiel played in his triumphs. Without Nemiel to measure himself against, to strive to overcome, he might never have been granted entrance into the Order. He might never have become a knight. Accordingly, he could never begrudge his brother's triumphs. If anything, he celebrated them as loudly as he did his own. But for Nemiel, it was a little different. He began to harbor secret reservations about Zahadiel's achievements. Despite his best efforts to control his thoughts, Nemiel found that there was a small voice within him that wished Zahadiel would not be too successful. Not that he ever wished harm or failure on his brother, but simply that Zahadiel's triumphs would always be more limited in magnitude than his own. Perhaps it was childish, but the competition between them had defined their lives for so long that Nemiel found it difficult to outgrow it. In many ways, his relationship with Zahadiel would always be as much about rivalry as it was about brotherhood. It was the nature of their lives. In the times to come, it would decide their fate. As members of the Order, Zahadiel and Nemiel trained to become full knights under Master Ramiel. As a quick aside, a lot of these names are pretty similar, so I apologize for any confusion, but I will do my best to explain the story in a way that mitigates this when possible. Zahadiel and Nemiel then go to the Circle Chamber of Alderuk to see Zahadiel's personal hero, Brother Amadis. Brother Amadis then talks to all the trainees gathered around, telling them all that he was once a novice just like them, and that he walked the same steps that they do, caught up in the power, strength, and conviction conviction in his words, Zahadiel vowed, there and then, that he would be the greatest knight the Order had ever seen. The next morning, Zahadiel is woken up by Nemiel, who informs him that Brother Amadis is leading them on a hunt. So Brother Amadis leads several groups of these trainees out on a hunt. Zahadiel's group includes Nemiel, of course. There's Attias, who is a little smaller and younger. He likes to carry around notebooks with him and writes down every word the senior knights and supplicants say, whether appropriate or not, for which he gets a lot of flack for. And finally, there was Eliath, who was taller and broader than any of the other supplicants. A big boy, if you will. So they ride on with Zahadiel in the lead, thinking that he hoped that Brother Amadis was nearby and would take note on how he was leading his fellows. But his thoughts were cut short when they rode into a clearing, and he realized just how silent the forest was. Even as that thought struck him that the forest was silent, it was already too late. Something dark and winged dropped from the trees, its body scaled and reptilian. Claws like swords flashed, and one of his squad was dead, both he and his mount shorn in two by the ferocity of the blow. Its large body was easily the size of one of their horses. Its spiny head snapped and bit at the end of a long snake-like neck. Its jaws long and narrow, filled with razored fangs like the teeth of a woodsman's saw. Zahadiel had never seen its like before, and his momentary horror at its awful appearance almost cost him his life. Barbed hooks scored a deep groove across his breastplate, pitching him from the back of his screaming horse. Zahadiel rolled away and was saved by Nemiel, crouching behind a tree and pumping shots from his pistol at the beast. The remnants of Zahadiel's squad were panicking in the face of the monster. Eliath was pinned beneath his mount, and Attias sat petrified with fear at the edge of the clearing. The beast turns towards Attias, but Zahadiel shouts to get its attention. Opening fire with his pistol, the beast strikes out at him, and he flies through the air to slam against a tree. Zahadiel, coming to his senses and shouting at his squad to get to the trees and spread out. Another of the group was dismembered by the beast. Zahadiel cried out and raised his sword and held it unsteadily before him as he faced the monster that he knew would kill him. He knew that fact with cold certainty, but he would not allow others to suffer and die without at least trying to save them, yelling at the beast to get away from them. The beast turned and looked at him with eyes that were empty and cold. And through those eyes, Zahadiel could tell that beyond even what it needed to feed and survive, this creature needed to inflict pain and took some primitive enjoyment from the act of slaughter. And just when all is lost, Brother Amadis comes in to kill the beast and save the day, with Brother Amadis commending Zahadiel for saving the lives of his friends. Zahadiel saying he was protecting his squad, the last of his strength beginning to fade now that the battle was over. Amadis catching him as he fell to the grass. "Rest, Zahadiel," said Amadis. "No," whispered Zahadiel. "I have to get them home. Let me do that for you, lad. You've done enough for one day." So years passed, and Zahadiel standing within the Order grew. His fight with the winged monster in the woods had almost cost him his life, but it had been the making of him. The senior masters of the Order knew his name, and though the monster had been slain by Brother Amadis, the knight had ensured that every member of the Order knew of Zahadiel's bravery in fighting it. Zahadiel is later speaking with Lord Cypher, the latter telling him the importance of tradition, and they are interrupted by Lionel Johnson, who leads Zahadiel up one of the towers of the fortress. Once they reach the top, the lion begins talking to Zahadiel, smiling at him, and it was clear that the lion was trying to put him at ease, but Zahadiel found it almost impossible to talk to him as though he was any other man. Johnson was too big, his presence too imposing. A man could no more ignore his extraordinary nature than he can ignore the wind and the rain, or the transition from day to night. The lion tells Zahadiel that the cleansing of the forest is entering its final stage, and that at this point there's probably only a dozen or so great beasts left in total, and they're all located in the North Wilds. The lion then musing, wondering what was up in the stars, saying that it's strange that everybody on Caliban knows the name Terra, but if the tales are true, it has been thousands of years since they last had contact with Terra. What if the tales were false? What if Terra is a myth? With Zahadiel saying, well, that would be terrible. If it all turned out to be a myth, we might start to doubt everything. We would lose our moorings. We would not know what to believe. With the lion saying, regardless of all of that, the past doesn't really matter to him. He thinks only of the future. And the musing goes on for a little bit, and finally the lion says, but what if the stars were to come to us? Zahadiel saying, I don't understand. Truthfully, nor do I, said the lion. But on nights when the stars are bright, I dream of a golden light and all of the stars of the heavens coming down to Caliban and changing our world forever. And that's a little bit of foreshadowing for you. A year or so later, a knightly order based in the North Wilds, the Knights of Lupus, led by Lord Sartana, come to meet with Lionel Johnson. The meeting almost immediately turning sour, with Lord Sartana being mad that the Order's men were encroaching upon the North Wilds, and the Lion being mad that Sartana's men slaughtered a group of their hunters, with Luther getting in between them trying to calm down the situation. The Lion mentioning that the town of Endriago alone has suffered nearly 200 dead at the hands of a beast. Brother Amadis stiffening at this news. The Lion then says there are beasts in the North Wilds, and he has to finish his crusade. Sartana saying, you can clear the beasts from the rest of Caliban, but the North Wilds and the lands of the Knights of Lupus were to be sacrosanct, saying that entering the North Wilds would be an act of war, with the Lion saying, if that's what it takes to free Caliban of the beasts, then so be it. Do you really think you could stop me? Probably not, admitted Sartana. Then why stand against me? Because in your quest to destroy, you will not be satisfied until you have all of Caliban under your heel. So Lord Sartana leaves in a huff, and Brother Amadis breaks the silence, being like, yo, is that true? Endriago is under attack? The Lion saying, I'm afraid so. Word reached us only yesterday. A beast has slain a great many of Endriago's people, though no one knows yet what manner of creature stalks the dark forest. Endriago was the place of my birth, Lord Johnson, said Amadis. I must avenge the death it has caused to my people. Then Amadis dropped to one knee. My Lord Johnson, I declare a quest against the beast of Endriago. So almost 5 months had passed since Brother Amadis had set out on his quest to destroy the beast of Endriago. And finally he returns, and Zahadiel is super stoked to see his hero. But that washed away in an instant when he saw him. He was drenched in sticky blood, and his left arm hung loosely by his side, the bones clearly shattered. Everyone rushes to him, and Lord Cypher asks if he needs a valediction, because it's obvious that his wounds are mortal. He nods over to Zahadiel, lifting his pistol towards him, asking him to take it. It's yours. I want you to have it. It is my legacy to you. Remember me when you fire it. Remember what I taught you. Brother Amadis saying, oh, I don't feel any pain anymore. That can't be good. That damn beast of Endriago got his claws into me. Big bastard too. A Calibanite lion. Thought there was only one of them. Zahadiel saying, a Calibanite lion? I thought Lord Johnson killed the only lion. I wish he had, Amadis said with a grimace. Might not be lying here. I just wish. But whatever Amadis' last wish would have been, it would forever remain a mystery, for his eyes glazed over and a soft breath whispered from between his lips, and he was dead. Zahadiel, overcome with grief, does something a little rash here. Lord Cypher, noticing what he's about to do, says, no lad, don't do it. Don't let anger and loss cloud your judgment. But Zahadiel is having none of it, with him turning and saying, my Lord Cypher, I declare a quest against the beast of Endriago. So they have a feast to see Zahadiel off, and all of his friends are pretty sad because they're like, okay, well, he's definitely gonna die, right? So it's a quest celebration, but it's also them saying goodbye, because they don't expect that they're ever gonna see Zahadiel again. With Nemiel being especially angry at Zahadiel, saying that you don't have a chance, you know, you shouldn't do this, with some tearful goodbyes. So Zahadiel ventures towards the forest near Endriago. So as he's journeying through the forest, he feels a presence in the trees and voices whispering around him. Kill him. He is touched by it. Zahadiel yelling for them to show themselves. He carries the taint within him. Better to kill him now. A figure stepped from the darkness of the trees. It was no more than a few feet in height, and was swathed from head to foot in a hooded Hesian robe that obscured every inch of its flesh. The darkness beneath its hood was more complete than that which surrounded Zahadiel, and he had the conviction that were he to see the truth of what lay beneath its cowl, he would be driven irrevocably mad. Zahadiel asking if they were the Watchers in the Dark, which is an old Calibanite myth, with them being like, yeah, that suffices. We are a cabal dedicated to thwarting the most ancient evil. What evil? Asked Zahadiel. You mean the great beasts? No. They are but a symptom of greater ill. I will not name this evil. Suffice to say, it is the bane of your race and will one day consume you. With more cryptic warnings coming from the Watchers in the Dark, with Zahadiel convincing them to not kill him because he also fights against evil and swears to do all in his power to stand against the same evil that they stand against. They accept his oath, but not first without a warning. Look not to unlock the door that leads to easy power, Zahadiel of the Order. Ride back to the lightning tree and you will find what you seek. and then they were gone. All of this, again, foreshadowing chaos and all of that. And the Watchers in the Dark become entwined with the Dark Angels later. So he rides back to the lightning tree, and lost in thought is caught almost completely unawares. The creature was huge and moved with impossible speed. The Calibanite lion was nearly on top of him. Sahadiel rolled away, firing a rippling salvo of shots. The rounds from his pistol had explosive cores designed to detonate deep inside a target's body, and had enough stopping power to kill almost anything, even a creature of such startling appearance and shape. The lion shrugged them off as though it barely felt the impacts. So they're fighting. Sahadiel scores a hit with his chainsword, but nothing seemed to slow the lion. The lion pins Sahadiel to the ground. Blade-like talons punched through the outer layers of his breastplate, and he screamed as the tips pierced the skin and muscle of his chest. He fired several shots into the lion's belly at point-blank range. There was an ominous cracking noise as the seals of his armor gave way. The lion stood atop him, knowing he was pinned and powerless, and content to watch him suffer a slow, agonizing death as it crushed the life out of him. The lion's claws lifted him from the ground towards his mouth as it prepared to bite him in two. He closed his eyes as the fangs bit down and felt an outpouring of his hatred explode from his body in a glittering halo of light. Everything stopped. Though his eyes were closed, he could see the shimmering outline of the lion. He could see every bone and internal organ laid bare to his sight, everything moving in slow motion around him, and with his newfound sight, he pressed his pistol against the monster's heart within the ghostly outline of the beast's body. He opened his eyes and pulled the trigger. Its underbelly exploded in a wash of steaming entrails, and it collapsed to the ground. Sahadiel wondering how he was able to slow down time and see inside the lion, but due to pain and exhaustion, brushed it off. Sahadiel took the lion's head back to Alderuk as a trophy. His quest a success. So when he comes back, everybody's like, yo, we definitely thought you were dead. But with his success, Sahadiel was elevated to full knighthood. So there's a big party and everybody's congratulating Sahadiel, and he goes off to talk to Luther, with Luther musing about his brother Lionel Johnson and how solitary he was. My brother is a man alone. It has always been that way with him. You must remember that he is as much a genius as he is a great warrior. His mind is a subtle and complex instrument, and his humor is shaped by the same brilliance he exhibits in everything else he does. When my brother makes jokes, no one understands them. He tends to pitch them too high for us roughhouse types. They go over our heads. So they're talking, and Sahadiel thinks that it had been Luther's tragedy to be born in the same era as a man against whom all his endeavors would be judged and forever found wanting in comparison. In any other era, Luther would probably have been acclaimed as the greatest hero of his age. Finally, Luther says, "My brother excels at whatever he turns his hands to. That is his tragedy." Sahadiel saying, his tragedy? How is it a tragedy to be good at everything? Perhaps tragedy is too strong a word for it, but you must remember that my brother is unique. He never speaks of his origins. They are as much a source of mystery to him as they are to everyone else. One might almost think of him as some god or demigod fallen to earth, rather than a man born of woman like the rest of us. My brother is set apart through no fault of his own. His intelligence is so dazzling, so extraordinary. There are times when even I cannot follow his line of reasoning, and I have known him for years, long enough to grow accustomed to his thought process. Think of how boring it must be for him. Don't misunderstand me. My brother loves Caliban and he loves the Order, but sometimes it must feel to him like he is a giant in a land of pygmies, both physically and mentally. Lord Cypher says that intellectual stimulation is based on the free discourse of ideas between equals, but my brother has no equals. Not on Caliban. Here, in the Order, we give him an outlet for his energies. We give him camaraderie and a sense of purpose. We give him our devotion. We would follow him on to death, but these things are not enough in a man's life. Even surrounded by friends and followers on all sides, my brother is still lonely. There is no one in Caliban like him. He is the loneliest man in the world. When they're done talking, Luther says, also I'd like to congratulate you, Sahadiel, and if you ever need any advice, you know where to come. If you have a problem, I will always listen. Later in the evening, he is talking to Lord Cypher, who drunkenly let slip the Lion was going to be made Grand Master of the Order, and that a new Lord Cypher would be chosen. And that was actually the last time that Sahadiel spoke to Lord Cypher. Having retired from his duties, the ex-Lord Cypher would go on a quest that he would never return from. Even later in the night, Zahadiel goes and talks to Lionel Johnson. The Lion saying that him and Zahadiel share a brotherhood that is shared by no others on Caliban. They are the only warriors to ever kill a Calibanite lion. All others who tried are dead, with them discussing that there's something wrong with the beasts. They're not the same as other beasts like horses or foxes. They're aberrations. So the party went on and talks turned to the war against the Knights of Lupus, which had been going on for a while now and had entered its final stages. So we cut ahead to the Order's siege of the fortress monastery of the Knights of Lupus. During this time skip, Nemiel has also been elevated to knighthood. So the knights charge the fortress, and Zahadiel and Nemiel follow Luther towards the central keep, where they discover that the Knights of Lupus have been capturing great beasts. Upon seeing this, Zahadiel was repulsed beyond words, with Lord Sartana appearing and saying, "Warriors of the Order, these are our lands and this is our fortress. You are not welcome here. You were never welcome here," and hits a lever and released the beasts. The lion and Luther killing one of these great beasts, but the lion receives all the credit from the men around him, and Zahadiel sees a flash of jealousy on Luther's face. Inside the keep's library, Zahadiel and Nemiel confront Lord Sartana. He warns them that the Lion's Crusade will destroy Caliban. The knightly orders were created to protect the people from the great beasts. With them gone, what do we protect them from? We are warriors. Conflict gives meaning to our existence. Without the beasts, the Knights of Caliban will inevitably just start to fight each other, with wars breaking out across the planet. Zahadiel and Nemiel inching closer to Lord Sartana, with him saying, "I may be old, but I think it will take more than 2 boys to defeat me." Nemiel saying, "We'll see." "No," said Lord Sartana, drawing a long-bladed hunting knife. "We won't," before stabbing himself in the heart. With his dying breath, he says, "You know the expression about darkness, don't you? That the road into darkness is paved with men's good intentions." "I've heard it, yes," said Zahadiel. "Perhaps someone should have mentioned it to the lion," said Sartana with the last of his strength. "Good intentions or not, Lionel Johnson will end up destroying Caliban. Of that I have no doubt. What will become of us?" Lord Sartana had said. "What will be of the warrior when there is no more war?" At the time, Zahadiel didn't really pay attention to the dying man's words. A great many years had yet to pass before he would think of those words frequently. He would wonder whether he could have changed the future. By then, of course, it was far too late. The Lion leads an honor guard, including Luther, Zahadiel, and Nemiel, to hunt the last great beast. So as they're riding out, the Lion says, "Caliban is ours. A golden age beckons us, my brothers. I have seen it in my dreams. A golden time of new and wondrous things. We stand on the very brink of that age, and..." There's an uncharacteristic pause, and he locks eyes with a golden Calibanite eagle. "I know this," said the Lion, his voice barely more than a whisper. And as he spoke, a strange wind blew, and Zahadiel saw something huge and dark roar overhead, Luther ordering them all to put their weapons away by order of the Lion. Then, amid the noise and confusion, Zahadiel saw shapes resolving from the howling winds and noise. Dark shapes, armored and descending on wings of fire. Beside him, Luther shielded his eyes and said, "And the angels of darkness descended on pinions of fire and light, the great and terrible dark angels." Zahadiel recognizing the words from an old fable. And then 10 hulking giants stood before the Lion's group. One of the giants reached up and took off his helmet, revealing a face of human proportions, though his features were more widely spaced and gigantic than most men's. An uncertain smile began to develop as the giant looked upon Lionel Johnson. "Who are you?" asked the Lion. "I am Midris," said the giant. He turned to his fellow giants and said, "We are the warriors of the First Legion." "The First Legion?" asked Luther. "Whose First Legion?" Midris turned to Luther and said, "The First Legion of the Emperor, master of mankind and ruler of Terra." So it cuts forward some more time, and the Imperium has already started to colonize Caliban, using big machines to cut down the trees and pull out the stumps and leveling the land. It was announced that the Emperor intended to visit Caliban. He was no more than 3 weeks travel time away. It was around this time that younger members of the orders were taking part in trials to see who was worthy to join the Astartes. During some of this training, Zahadiel and Nemiel are racing on a track. It seemed that Nemiel was going to win, much to Zahadiel's despair, but all of a sudden he was granted a wellspring of new energy within his body, allowing him to push harder and faster. And Astartes, who had been watching, comes over and says, "You run a fast race, boy. How did you win that race?" I just ran faster," said Zahadiel. "Yes, But where did that strength come from? I don't know. I just dug deep, I suppose. Perhaps, though I suspect you do not know where you dug into. Come with me, Zahadiel. I have questions for you. And call me Brother Librarian Israphael. So it turns out that the power that he tapped into and the power that he used to slay the Calibanite lion is because Zahadiel has latent psyker abilities. Zahadiel worrying that does this exclude me from the trials? With Israphael saying no, if anything, it makes you more likely to be chosen. Israphael then going on to tell Zahadiel the history of the Imperium and everything that's been happening in the galaxy, from Old Night to the Emperor unifying Terra. Zahadiel and Nemiel are later talking on the walls of the fortress, excited at both being selected for the final Astartes trials. Nemiel telling Zahadiel that he had been listening to senior people of the Order, and that Zahadiel should come to a gathering that they're having tonight, making Zahadiel promise that he'll come. So Zahadiel later shows up to the secret meeting, and it turns out that there's a group amongst the Order who views the Imperium of Man as invaders to Caliban. They do not like that they're here, and they're changing things on the planet. Zahadiel's saying that they're all crazy, basically, and the members saying, no, we can't trust the Imperium. To kill a serpent, you cut off its head. We must kill the Emperor. And Zahadiel doesn't like that at all. He's like, screw that. I'm not here for that. So he storms away, and Nemiel hurriedly follows him and is like, hey, slow down. Don't take any of that seriously. Don't worry. There's no treachery. They're not actually gonna do anything. They're just venting their frustrations. Zahadiel not really buying it and saying, no, I'm gonna make sure the lion knows of it. With Nemiel saying, you would renounce me to the lion? Zahadiel then saying, I will, unless you promise me that you cease this conspiracy at once. And Nemiel saying, I understand. I will speak to them. So it cuts forward to the day that the Emperor is supposed to land on Caliban. Zahadiel is part of the Lion's honor guard, who is setting out to meet the Emperor upon his arrival. But all of a sudden, he felt a strong sense of dread, and he didn't really know why until he locked onto the face of someone in the crowd, and he realized it was one of the conspirators. Zahadiel then pursues the man in the crowd, knowing that something's going on. The man trying to get away from Zahadiel, but he catches up with him and beats him down. The man had been carrying a bunch of explosives. Everything stops as Zahadiel notices the Emperor's golden vessel coming down from the heavens. Shadows played over him, and he looked up to see the broad outline of a giant standing over him, its bulk massive and threatening. Astartes. A gauntlet seized his throat and yanked him from his opponent. His feet dangled and his throat ceased to draw air as the pressure on his neck increased. The power in the Astartes was immense, and Zahadiel knew that with a tiny fraction of movement, his neck could be snapped like kindling. Through graying vision, Zahadiel saw yet more of the Astartes warriors as they unceremoniously scooped up his fallen opponent. What do you have there, Midris? Asked one of the newly arrived giants. The warrior looked straight into his eyes, and Zahadiel felt the fury of the warrior's hatred burning through the red lenses of his helmet as consciousness faded to blackness. Traitors, spat Midris. Zahadiel woke in a gleaming cell of bare metal walls. He was then hauled out of his bed by Midris. Outside of his cell, Brother Israphael was waiting for him, together with another Astartes warrior in white armor. He was then dragged to a darkened chamber, with the only light coming from the corridor he had been carried along. But then the door shut behind them, and he was plunged into darkness. It was in this darkness that he was interrogated, Zahadiel telling them that he had nothing to do with the plot, and it was him, in fact, that stopped it. And they were like, yeah, that's the only reason you're not strapped to an excruciator table right now. Now tell us everything you know and leave nothing out of it. Start with how you knew what Brother Ulient was planning. Zahadiel's like, Brother Ulient? Was that his name? I don't actually know him. With Midris asking, well, then why did you pursue him in the crowd? And Zahadiel just saying, well, I don't know, he just looked out of place. And Israphael's like, out of place? Is that all? One face in thousands and you saw it? Zahadiel's saying, I felt something was wrong. I just knew there was something wrong in the crowd, and he ran away when I challenged him. So I chased after him. Midris just thinks he's lying at this point. Israphael eventually saying, okay, I'm gonna look into him, and uses his psyker powers to peer into Zahadiel's mind. It was agonizing for Zahadiel, and he reached for the same power that had defeated the Beast of Endriago. With his powers activated, he could finally see everything around him, and saw the Astartes as clearly as though they were illuminated by spotlights. I see you, he said, but then a soothing, sourceless voice spoke in his mind. Careful, Zahadiel. You are unschooled in such matters, and it does not do to tap so recklessly into such power. Not even the most powerful of our breed can know the dangers of such things. And although Zahadiel heard the words clearly, he realized that he was the only one that could hear it. So Zahadiel told them everything. He told them of the clandestine meeting between the conspirators, although he left out the part played by his cousin. Then he spoke of the unease that had led him to pursue Brother Ulient. Throughout it all, Brother Israphael scanned Zahadiel's mind for lies. Zahariel could tell that Azrael wanted him to be exonerated, so that he might yet become one of the Astartes, so that he might further train him in the use of his powers. Finally, Midras said, "You have courage, boy. If what you say is true, then we owe you a great debt." "It is true," said Zahariel. "Just ask brother Azrael." Azrael laughed, and he's like, "Yeah, he's right, Midras. I sense no lie in his words." "You're sure? Have I ever been wrong?" "No, but there's always a first time." "He is not wrong," said a voice from behind Zahariel. He turned to see a tall figure, resplendent in a mighty suit of gleaming armor silhouetted in the doorway. The voice was the one that he had heard in his head before he had begun his tale. Zahariel tried to see past the glare of the light behind the figure, but his eyes were still adjusting from the total blackness to the light. The light spread over the deck, rippling like golden water as it radiated from the armored warrior. "It seems I owe you a great debt, young Zahariel," said the golden figure, "and for that I thank you. In time you will forget this, but while your memories are still your own, I wish to thank you for what you did." He then turns to Azrael, telling him that Zahariel is a prime candidate for the Librarius. It doesn't explicitly say it in the book, but this is obviously the Emperor of Mankind himself. It cuts forward to the Lion giving a speech to all the knights who had been selected to become Astartes. Among them was Zahariel, Nemiel, Attias, and Eliath. "You have all chosen to become part of the greatest warrior order the galaxy has ever seen. You will be stronger, faster, and more deadly than ever before. You will fight in wars beyond counting, and you will kill the enemies of mankind on worlds far distant from our beloved home of Caliban. But we will do these things willingly, for we are men of honor and courage, men who know what it is to have a duty that transcends personal concerns. Each of you was once a knight, a warrior, and a hero, but now you are far more than that. From this day forth, you will forget your past life. From this day forth, you are a warrior of the Legion. Nothing else is of consequence. The Legion is all that matters. We are the First Legion, the honored, the Sons of the Lion, and we will not be marching to war without a name that strikes terror into the hearts of our enemies. As our legends spoke of the great heroes who held back the monsters of our distant past, so too shall we hold back the enemies of the Imperium as we set off into the great void to fight in the name of the Emperor. We shall be the Dark Angels." So now Zahariel is a full Astartes, and has been inducted into the Legion's Librarius. They are headed to the planet of Sarash. There they are to relieve a portion of the White Scars, who are supervising Sarash. The Sarashi wish to join the Imperium, but their complex bureaucracy has caused long delays. Later, Zahariel is talking to a White Scars Astartes named Kurgis, who's like, "Hey, thank you for setting us free, you and your brothers. I'm just sorry that such noble warriors must take up our former position, because this place and these people kinda suck." And they're talking and bonding and stuff, until eventually Kurgis says, "Don't trust them." "Who?" says Zahariel. "The people of Sarash. You haven't met them yet, brother, so I thought I should warn you. Don't trust them, and don't turn your back on them." "I thought they were peaceful. According to the briefings, they have been welcoming from the first." "They have," agreed Kurgis. "But still, I would not trust them. Not if you have any sense, brother. And don't trust the briefings. The Lord Governor has too much influence on what was written within them." Kurgis saying, "Hey, don't get me wrong, the Soroshi are nice and everything, but every time we get one step closer to them joining the Imperium, there's another problem that arises with the compliance process. There's just something off about it." Zahariel asking, "Do you think that they're delaying compliance for a reason?" "I don't know. There is a saying on my homeworld, if a man follows wolf tracks, it is likely he will find a wolf. But I cannot offer you any proof of my suspicions, brother. I simply thought I should warn you. Be wary of these people. Do not trust them." A day later, Zahariel felt that there was every indication that the White Scar had given him good advice about Sarash. He didn't have any evidence to confirm it. It was more of a gut feeling. It was probably that they were always wearing masks. It was the cultural norm for all the adults and children on Sarash to continually wear masks. The masks were rigid and made of gold, covering the wearer's face entirely. And Zahariel was like, "Well, that's pretty weird." Something else was odd. Based on the census data that was provided to them, the planet's birth rate and the number of deaths indicated that the population on Sarash should be much bigger than it appeared. 8%, Kurgis told him. Put that way, it doesn't sound much, I know, but if the calculations are right, it means that more than 70 million people have disappeared on Sarash in the course of the last 10 years. Later, a delegation from Sarash boarded the Invincible Reason via shuttle, the Lion taking them away to meet with the rest of the fleet commanders. Zahariel and Luther then take a look at the Sarashi shuttle. Luther emerged from beneath the shuttle on the far side from Zahariel, and he could see that the Legion's second in command had gone utterly pale, and he looked at the shuttle with a strange expression that Zahariel could not read. And Zahariel's like, "Oh, you good? And Luther's like, oh, yeah. No, it's nothing. I just distracted is all. So over with the delegation, things aren't exactly going well. The Lord Exalter saying that he doesn't really like that compliance is being forced upon them, asking, will you destroy us if we do not comply with your wishes? With the governor-elect saying, well, that's to say, the Lion interrupting. It is not the governor-elect's decision to make. It is mine. Your question implies a criticism of our ways, Lord Exalter. You must understand. The aim of this crusade is to reunite all of the lost fragments of mankind. We come to you as brothers. We have no wish to use force to bring about your compliance, but experience tells us that it is sometimes necessary. Occasionally, whether through ignorance or because they are controlled by an unsuitable regime, the people of a rediscovered world choose to oppose us. It makes no difference. We have come to rescue you. Whether or not you wish to be rescued is hardly material to the outcome. The Lord Exalter then saying that, oh yeah, I hear that you guys say that there's no gods, and you say his religion's illegal, right? The Lion's like, yeah, but I don't really see why that matters. I was told that you share our view on religion. With the Lord Exalter saying, well, you're wrong. We actually love religion, and we have many temples. And we knew your nature at once. The Emperor is a demon, sent by dark powers to lead mankind astray. Back on the embarkation deck, Zahadiel is again checking out the shuttle, and then he noticed something weird behind a panel. It's a weapon of some sort, said a voice behind him. An atomic warhead, I think. Zahadiel spun around to see Luther. An atomic warhead? Yes, said Luther. I think the whole shuttle is nothing but one giant missile. You knew of this? Why didn't you say anything? Luther turns away from him. Basically, Luther was really jealous of the Lion, always being in his shadow, and he realized that if something were to happen to the Lion, he would assume command of the Dark Angels. Zahadiel asking, well, if that was his plan, why did he come back? With Luther saying, I just couldn't do it. I'm here to stop it. Zahadiel saying, okay, cool. Well then, how do we stop it? That I don't know. Back with the delegation, the Lion is pissed that the High Exalter was insulting the Emperor. And then he just keeps on going, saying, you guys are evil men. You are all abominations. The Lion, gripping his sword, yells, enough! By the Emperor. I spit on your Emperor, and I spit on you, Lionel Johnson. You are not men nor worthy leaders. You are... He was not allowed to finish the sentence. Before the Lord High Exalter could say another word, the Lion drew his gleaming sword and clove through the fat man's shoulder down into his ample gut. Back on the embarkation deck, Zahadiel looked down at the device, and the blinking lights suddenly began to speed up. The engines of the shuttle coughed to life, and a rising whine of ignition built within them. Damn, said Luther. Luckily, Luther and Zahadiel are able to eject the shuttle into space before it detonates. Later, in a commander's meeting, an astropath tells them all that there's some weird warp shenanigans going on the planet. There's a growing buildup of psychic energy in the northern deserts, indicative of a major warp rift. It seems they're trying to summon some Xeno beast from the warp. Brother Azrael has a solution though, an electro-psychic pulse. It may be possible to counteract the buildup of psychic energy by detonating an electro-psychic pulse weapon in the vicinity, with the Lion saying, okay, well, what's an electro-psychic pulse weapon? It's simply a modified cyclonic warhead, explained as Raphael. The only catch is we need to detonate it as close to the source as possible, and the blast must be directed by one schooled in the psychic arts, with the Lion saying, okay, let's begin. The Dark Angels descended to where the warp energy was growing, down to a mining station. Going down the mine shaft, Zahadiel suddenly became aware of a rising and repulsive odor. He tried to shout a warning, but it was too late. The building nearest Attias ruptured as something massively powerful tore through it and leapt to the attack. The creature spat something in Attias' face, and his helmet erupted in hissing smoke as though doused with acid. It wrapped around Attias as it tore at him with razor claws that sliced open the victim's power armor like tinfoil. It then retreated as bolter rounds chased it, Zahadiel rushing to check on his friend. Attias writhed in agony, with Zahadiel tearing the helmet free. Attias screamed as the skin of his face came with it, ropes of flesh drooling like molten rubber from the remains of his helm, the apothecary rushing to help him. The Dark Angels make their way to a cavern, and the mystery of what had become of Sarash's missing population was a mystery no more. Steel walkways crossed an immense chasm that was filled almost to the brim with dead dead bodies. Millions of dead bodies. Zahariel was disgusted. Whatever came next, whatever death and destruction the Dark Angels visited upon the heads of the Sarashi, it would not nearly be enough. They continued down into the depths, and with sick horror, saw the source of the monstrous evil that had dwelled in this forgotten, red-lit cavern beneath the world. Its jelly-like body was that of some deep ocean trench dweller, shimmering, apparently fragile, and lit from within by bursts of colored electric light. A million eyes stared out from its hideous form, and he could feel its raw hunger as a gnawing ache in his chest. The creature attacks, and the Dark Angels are giving Azrael time to start the modified cyclonic warhead. The creature attacks with hosts of tentacles emerging from portals of light, multicolored and unclean, and Zahariel knew that what lurked on the other side was pure and undiluted evil. They were fighting a losing battle, like a hydra. Anytime they defeated a tentacle, two more took its place. Finally, Brother Azrael shouts, "Zahariel, now!" He turned at the sound of his name, watching his brother Azrael mash the activation stud on the warhead's firing mechanism. Knowing what he had to do, Zahariel focused every ounce of his psyche and took hold of the electro-psychic force, turning it to his own needs, wielding the power as a technician wields a plasma cutter. Zahariel and Azrael destroying the waving tentacles and sealing shut the tears in reality from which they had emerged. And with that, it was over. The Dark Angels gathered up their dead and made their way back to the surface of Sarash. The Lion had said nothing on their journey to the surface, keeping his own counsel, not even offering words of praise to his warriors. As they boarded the Stormbirds, Zahariel felt a strange sensation of unease along his spine, and he turned to discover its source. Lionel Johnson was looking straight at him. Zahariel watched as the invincible reason diminished in the viewing portal, the Stormbird streaking through space towards the wrath of Caliban and disgrace. Barely 6 hours had passed since the victory at the mining station 1 Zeta 5, and events had moved with such rapidity upon their return to the expedition fleet that he could scarcely believe what had happened at all. No sooner had the warriors of Zahariel's company returned to the invincible reason than they had been issued with new deployment orders. A declaration from the Lion announced that the flow of new recruits from Caliban was not proceeding as swiftly as was hoped. Therefore, experienced Astartes were to return to the homeworld with all speed to ensure that the recruitment of new warriors was put back on track. The Great Crusade was entering a new and vigorous stage, and the Dark Angels needed fresh warriors to take the light of the Imperium onwards. As to the pacification of Sarash, the fight had gone out of its inhabitants following the battle beneath mining station 1 Zeta 5. The knowledge of their world's avenging angels' demise, traveling the globe in the time it took the news to reach the expedition fleet. Army units from nearby expedition fleets, as well as a demi-legion of Titans from the Fire Wasps, were en route to crush any last resistance, and all that remained was to implement full compliance once the last smoldering coals of rebellion had been smothered. Zahariel studied the deployment order to see who was being sent back to Caliban. He saw that Nemiel was to remain, and had sought out his cousin before the allotted hour for departure, but Nemiel was nowhere to be found, and Zahariel had done his duty as ordered, reporting to the embarkation deck with the rest of the warriors earmarked to return home. The sense of crushing dejection was total, and though there was no outward stigma attached to their departure from the fleet, every warrior knew the truth of it in his heart. The Lion did not want them with him, and that was the greatest hurt of all. Brother Librarian Azrael was there, as was Eliath and the wounded Attias, as well as hundreds upon hundreds of other loyal warriors. Their contribution to the Great Crusade had been so small, so insignificant in the scale of what was to come, that Zahariel doubted the chroniclers would even bother to record the short war on Sarash. The Great Crusade would continue, though it would continue without Zahariel. Worse than that, it would continue without the man sitting furthest away from any other in the Stormbird. It would continue without Luther. Thank you so much for staying to the end of the video. I really appreciate it. Let me know in the comments any ways you think I can improve these videos. You all are amazing. See you next time. Goblin out.